the Bible calls us to be humble and to be like Christ. We are aware of Christ as our model. And I think for a Christian leader, pastor, or any ministry leader, the Bible is very clear that we need to be ready to hear feedback from people we serve. I want to differentiate between feedback and criticism. There is a difference. Sometimes leaders are so thin-skinned that they struggle to get feedback. Feedback from a good-hearted person who isn't trying to hurt us is something we should recognize and really, I think, not see it as criticism. It's feedback, especially when it comes from a kind-hearted person who's wanting to help us grow. But the criticism that we chafe against the most, of course, is perhaps coming from maybe questionable motives. Maybe it's an attack on our character or our production. We preached a sermon or taught a lesson and someone says, that wasn't very good. Who taught you to preach anyway? Or something that is hurtful. And I am so concerned that we as Christian leaders develop some skills in handling those kinds of situations. 2 Samuel 16 tells the story of King David's life when he was fleeing from his son Absalom, who was out to take the throne and possibly take his life. So David is fleeing the city. His folks are coming along with him. And there's this guy named Shimei, or something like that, who is throwing rocks and cursing the king. Imagine, here's David, worst day of his life, perhaps, and here's a guy throwing rocks at him. Now, King David had a sidekick also. His name was Abishai. He was a warrior. And Abishai said to King David something like this: "Do you want me to go over and take off his head?" And I quickly would say that there are times for all of us in ministry that we wish we had an Abishai near us. Yes, why, thank you. I'd be great if you'd go take care of that. You be the complaint department today. But here's the context on that, of course. King David is fleeing the city and running from his son, really initiated by his own sin, his own foolishness. So here's David reaping his own foolish sin. And part of that involves running from his son, trouble in his own house. And then there's this guy yelling at him. Well, Shimei wasn't exactly all wrong. He knew that this king had caused some foolishness himself. He knew that there was something he'd done that was shameful. So he's throwing rocks, which wasn't a good idea. But I find David's answer so intriguing as he answers Abishai, who volunteers to take off the guy's head. He says something like this. You'll find it in 2 Samuel 16. He says, perhaps today the Lord has told him to curse. He says, don't take off his head. Maybe the Lord will reward me with good for my having experienced abuse from him. So he lets the man live. He shows mercy rather than allowing Abishai to go take off the guy's head. Now, those are Old Testament examples, but ultimately the Bible calls us to have the humility and grace of Jesus, and this is not easy. Anybody who has been in ministry has experienced painful criticism. You can't be in ministry or leadership, Christian leadership, without being criticized hard along the way. And I think there's some sense in which the Bible's call to humility is wanting to draw us toward Christ. It's recognizing God's sanctifying purpose in criticism. And I believe that God does. He has a sanctifying purpose in allowing us to be criticized.